This watch is like no other for many big, and I mean literally big, reasons. However, there's one little component inside this Skylab that's ruining this complication for the whole of the watch community. We live in a world of trendsetters. John Mayer, Rihanna, Taylor Swift, that guy who couldn't pronounce JLC. We all know them, and Horology could not escape their stardom. Well, I think that one of their trends has finally caught on. Or should I say maybe the watch caught me in this situation. This is the Nubeo Skylab review. Lessons are learned every day, and for this watch pirate, a lesson in reading the specifications of a watch is very much long overdue. Because in true shoot the email first and ask the questions later fashion, this watch pirate failed to realize that this new Nubeo Skylab measures a hefty 48mm. Note also to self to never send an email when your watch says tree and there's no sun outside the yard. A quick glance from this watch and you could see that it's not for the faint of heart, but rather could serve as a heart to a time-traveling DeLorean or to a certain billionaire playboy philanthropist. There's only one complication to talk about, and it's setting the time. Screw down the crown, pull it, and set the time accordingly. You can set this crown forwards or backwards. The digits will turn as expected. I'm personally drawn to these very animated displays of time, and this wandering hour complication still gives me a measure of enjoyment. Let's point to the first inescapable feature of this dial, that massive wandering hour structure. This is the biggest execution of this complication so far that I've ever seen. This is showcased by an equally massive and dense crystal that could double as a pocket watch crystal. Another feature is this 24mm strap that has all of the expected stuff such as a custom buckle and contrasting keepers. There's also some holders for the first keeper to lock it into place, and there's some decorations underneath the strap to make things interesting. Speaking of interesting, the backside has a diagram of the NASA Skylab that I find is a cool way of masking over that Miyota caliber. On the sides you see this dual molded crown that's big and impressive. It is then sandwiched between two massive frame sides. On the wrist it really feels like the whole Skylab space station is landing on my skin. It's massive and it's just a whole chunk of metal. If this was green, I'm pretty sure I'll morph into one of 10 pre-configured aliens if I didn't already look like one myself. Once you pry it off your arm, you can easily feel that weight. That's actually 146 grams that I'm holding right now. For all it's worth, it is a multi-dimensional watch beginning with its solid impression. Let's talk about its profile. Yes, it is imposing, much similar in a way that a GShock is imposing on your wrist, but maybe a slightly bigger and more robust version of that. The bezel and extremely domed crystal provide some much needed curves. Against the much slimmer Atowak Tarantula, I still hate that name, the bulk of the Skylab is pretty much ready to squash this other wandering hour bug. Here you can see though the hint of what's ruining the complication for the watch enthusiast. What's the likelihood of this watch pirate having to review this previously rare complication? Well, in fact, this is the 4th wandering hour watch I've ever reviewed. Yes, this is a ginormous version of the complication, but you can't help but think that you've seen it before and done better. But credit where credit is due. It's not exactly easy to pull off such a design, and this one at the very least gets its space theme locked in. Now from space to Earth, let's compare it to the biggest G-Shock I could find in the house. This is the legendary Mud Master gifted by an equally legendary viewer, Jeff D. The profiles are not that different, but the Skylab is relatively sleeker looking beside this Mud Master. If there was a market for these bigger watches, there's no other proof of that than this G-Shock. Both can feel really at home on bigger wrists as one may expect. On my 6¼ inch wrist, it's just subjugating my cuff to the fullest, while the Tarantula with the same complication sits well enough and welcome. Switching it up with the Mud Master and well, the Mud Master wins out my approval. This is because I already have a pre-influenced acceptance of large G-Shocks than with mechanical watches such as this. Look, There is a certain appeal to the Skylab, and it's not hard to imagine an Invicta fan could love this behemoth. After all, it's a lot more interesting on the engineering side. Now let's check out the versatility side of the Skylab. Nubeo made sure that you could at the very least play around with the 26mm bands of this timepiece. You can swap out bands using some unnecessary visual editing or with the spring bar tool that's also provided in the box. Well, they better give you all these goodies because this is a $1,000 watch after all. Here, Nubeo opted to make the ring keepers contrasting against the band itself, but not if I can do something about it. Because with one carefully placed cut, and we can now enjoy a full black stealthier Skylab. It's still an unnecessary editing work, but I just can't help myself. I think this is the best configuration of this watch. It feels a lot more compact, and it's cohesive in an aesthetic manner. Now, you know I will manage to squeeze in an Artem strap into this review, and I felt that the NATO would be a great test dummy for that. So let's try it on. This of course will clash a lot with the Skylab as its keepers are steel polished and the stripes will just add visual noise to the piece. But I can visualize in my noggin that someone out there would have a more fitting fabric strap for this configuration. I'm showing you this to demonstrate that even though it's a lugless design, you can still pass through a NATO in this. Typically, there is no room for a fabric strap in this lugless design as the spring bar holes would be too close to the body, but not this one. Here, I laid the fabric on the case lugs first and then installed the spring bars on top of the NATO, pinning it into place. Once it's installed, it feels quite secure as those are some hefty spring bars that Nubeo provided in this Skylab. So there is some playability in there, much more than I expected. But let's go back to my favorite setup, and this is the combo that this watch will be on for now. It's a noble attempt, and I think this watch is one of the more approachable designs from Nubeo looking at their very extensive catalog. If it's not as obvious to you yet as this watch is, this is the only ship you can hop on board for all your wacky new microbrands. So subscribe and comment like these watch pirate babies. Horology says this is something that he would wear if he was a watch pirate. The Moser folk remarks that this is gorgeous but the price tag makes him think twice. But I found someone who actually likes this watch. Marceau Rotard says the 48mm and 16mm thick is a chunk of a watch. This watch is really hard to miss, and surprisingly, it's also hard to shoot. Whatever I could shoot through the lens is actually pretty well crafted though. If there was $1,000 in this watch, most of them will be in the immense structure inside. The hexagonal shapes are lifted straight off the Skylab space station that it's trying to honor. The satellite hour pointers could also double as the solar panels of the reference with its lateral grooves framing the numerals. The whole structure is planted inside a really deep wall of markers and lume. This is so deep that it's actually impressive to be able to focus in and out of this deep dial. This would have been much more appreciated if it weren't for this glare-heavy glass. The refraction this crystal creates is just unbelievable. The lens on this is so thick that the glare also reflects from the other side of the circumference. But once I was able to get the shot, it is truly a machine that's beautiful to look at. The lume is also pretty great, if only it lasted a little bit longer. But combine the two and you get this very unique light bending effect. But back to the wandering hour. Notice what Jason Chan, a microbrand creator, says about wandering hour watches. The module has become too common. Atawak, Angles, Nubeo, and Xerox coming next week. And this is no coincidence. See, this is all because of one ingenious spec that facilitates this digital changing mechanism. This little component is responsible for changing a whole hobby's perception. This wandering hour contraption rolls and changes numerals as it hits the peg. It's so simple and reliable that even when you turn the crown backwards, it will change the time accordingly. This is such a simple mechanism that manufacturers are able to mount this easily on a low-cost caliber. In turn, it makes it possible for more microbrands to use this complication. Before the microbrand revolution, this is a complication reserved only for the most elite of brands. The unfortunate side effect, though, is that enthusiasts are getting desensitized to this actually amazing mechanical complication. The upside? It's now more affordable, relatively, and you have more presentations to choose from. Some may feel that it ruins the appeal of the wandering hour timepiece as it becomes less and less special, while others will simply see it as a very expensive toy. As this type of watch is getting more and more common, maybe the Skylab from Nubeo could leave a bigger impression. And that's the Skylab from Nubeo. It's one big hunk of steel on your wrist, and here's an unfiltered watch pirate true story right here. When I went and communicated with them, reached out to them through Instagram, it never went into my mind to check the dimensions of this watch. And then when I got the package, I was supremely surprised that it's actually that big. It's massive. It's as big, if not bigger, than a GShock. But hey, it has some really great technology on it. It has some really nice curves and facets. It's well built and really solid on the wrist. If I had a wrist of 7.5 or maybe 8-inch, this would fit really, really well. Actually, I could still pull it off a little bit. I'm not really that a stranger or an alien to these kind of big watches on my wrist, but man, this is massive, and this one I couldn't recommend for smaller wrists, for wrists under 7 inches. Comment down below, let me know what you think. Is the trend of big watches coming back? I don't think so, but this star themed, space themed watch has a lot of interesting touches to it. It has a gorgeous crystal as well, and maybe some of you may like this, but for this dainty watch pirate, this trend is over. I don't know what that means. I've just talked a bunch of mumbo jumbo. That's all I could say.